If you're training for an endurance sport and you have an autoimmune disease, be sure to watch this video. Hello everyone and welcome back to Tush Trains. On today's topic, I will be talking about training for an Ironman with an autoimmune past, and I'm going to go over my science-backed holistic protocol so you can see what I do to prepare for this event. For those of you who don't know me, I have alopecia universalis, meaning I lose hair from every part of my head and all over my body systemically due to inflammation, due to my immune system attacking my own cells basically. Training for endurance events whilst having some type of autoimmune disease is really hard, and I want to show people that there is a way around it and there is a way to manage these things, albeit it's going to be very hard. I won't sugarcoat anything, it will be hard, but with these tips you should be able to come up with something that suits your needs and to get you through that event and not stress yourself out and not get worn out by life. So without further ado, I will be splitting this part into 4 quadrants. The first one is going to be stress and hormones. The second one is immune system and recovery. The third one is nutrition and supplements. And the fourth one is training strategy. For the first one, I want to talk about stress and strength. Basically, what you want to do when training for an event like the Ironman is you want to manage your cortisol for endurance, because endurance training makes your stress go insanely high, and everybody knows that your stress goes up when you train, and it's meant to be a good thing too. At the same time, chronic overload of that cortisol is going to be bad for you in the long run. So to consider this, we need to think about 2 things. So the first one would be the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis. And what this does is send signals from your brain to the adrenals, and the adrenals produce cortisol. So the second thing you need to consider is chronic cortisol. So what happens when you have prolonged chronic cortisol? You have a decreased immune function and you have an increase in inflammation. So there are some key points to this. When you're doing something like the Ironman, endurance training basically elevates cortisol, which is completely normal in the short run, but chronic elevation actually wrecks the immune system, and obviously you don't want that. Like I said, I have alopecia, so what I tend to do is I tend to track my cortisol rhythms with sleep, heart rate variability, and morning energy levels. So during your sleep, you have deep sleep, you have REM, and these are all things that you need to consider. In terms of HRV, which is heart rate variability, this is the most important factor. So this will be basically your variation in your heart rate and how much you can train based upon that. Also, your morning energy levels, you need to have some type of tracker or some type of metric to actually understand this a lot better. And like I said before, I have alopecia, so actually I have a spot just on my back. If you can see right here, I've got a spot. So I wasn't actually paying attention to my body, and it led to me having another alopecia patch. So this stuff comes and goes, but what you want to do in the end is you want to find a way to mitigate the things that cause that in the first place. And you want to find a way so that you don't actually have these patches coming up, or you don't have a flare up of your disease of any kind, and you don't want to have the symptoms. So all of this is basically to reduce that whilst you're trying to do things like the Ironman, or whilst you're running for a marathon, or anything of that kind. So first and foremost, training is a stress signal. Every session you do needs to actually be balanced with recovery, nourishment, and regulation. I'm just going to show you something here that will help you digest it. So train, recover, adapt equals progress. So the most important thing in this is to recover. This is where your immune system resets. So I never used to actually get the proper recovery, which led to lots of flare-ups of alopecia and lots of spots, eyebrows falling out and whatnot. So be sure to pay attention to your recovery. I have a Garmin watch tracker that actually tracks all of my recovery and how long it takes to recover. So I would use that almost every single day to find out what exactly am I doing wrong and what am I doing that is right. So number 2 is the immune system and recovery. What I want you to do is to picture this scale. And on one side we're going to have training, and the other side we're going to have immune function. So training is basically self-explanatory. You train maybe 4 times a week, 3 times a week, 6 times a week. you maybe have 1 recovery day or 2 recovery days, or maybe even 3. But in terms of immune function, it becomes a bit complicated. So there are 3 main recovery inputs that you need to think about, which are sleep, nutrition, and your nervous system. Now, in regard to this, if you have autoimmune issues, for instance, immune systems are trigger happy, so they're already in that trigger happy phase, and what you need to do is you need to teach it to be calm. One of the ways I would do this is to prioritize parasympathetic recovery, which would be to do breath work and to do cold plunges and stuff like that, so that my parasympathetic nervous system resets. One critical component to this is that you should have 1 day of rest in recovery. So this is the 1 day which I rest and recover. You can do this and it would be guilt-free basically. For me, to be honest, I always want to train and I don't want to have rest days. But I've noticed that it's really important to have these things, and it's critical for your system to actually recover. So you need to schedule 1 mandatory day where you actually rest and recover. So for me, it's not really guilt-free because I do think about training even on the days off. I normally never take days off. I just do a resistance session, and that would be my day off basically. Or I would do some active recovery running. If you have an autoimmune disease, you'll need to look for signs for a compromised immune system. This would be a sore throat, fatigue, mood swings, and inflammation. And if you see any of these, you need to back off the activity immediately, and you need to sort that one out first. So there is a basic checklist that I made right here, and the first one would be to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. You need to have morning sunlight, so get at least 15 minutes of morning sunlight. You need to do half an hour or 1 hour of breath work, and you need to monitor your heart rate variability. Now, this can be done with several pieces of equipment, such as an ECG, which is an electrocardiogram, or you could have a heart rate strap, a Garmin heart rate strap for instance, which I'm gonna get, or you could use a smartwatch, which is a bit less inaccurate. I would suggest to go with an ECG if you do have the facilities to do that. Now, going on to number 3 is nutrition and supplements. Now I want you to picture a pyramid with 3 levels. The base of this is to have anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense whole foods. This would cover almost everything. The next pillar is to have strategic carbs centered around workouts. So say for instance, I'm running a huge amount the next day, and it's probably above 90 minutes, say, of very intense activity or zone 2 activity. I would carb load the night before so that I have the carbs adequate for me to actually use on the run. Or I would probably have some carbs in the morning, like sourdough bread or something like that, and that would fuel my workouts for the rest of the day. Now, the third one is supplements, which is right at the top. It's the smallest bit. Supplements are basically supplementary, hence the name. So you need to get most of your nutrients from nutrient-dense foods. You need to have strategic carbs, and you need to have supplements. But supplements are supplementary to this diet. I just want to say that nutrition is everything. It's basically information to your immune system. And what I eat on a daily basis is anti-inflammatory, high micronutrient meals. So examples of this would be salmon, avocado, sweet potato, greens, olive oil, and bone broth. Now, bone broth is one of my favorites, but I haven't actually been making it that recently. So I need to get back on the bone broth because it really did wonders for my health. In regard to training for endurance sports, carbs are not the enemy. Despite all of this controversy online, carbs are not the enemy. They are fuel for training and recovery, and you need carbs to survive. Now, let's just go over my supplement breakdown. So every day I have omega-3s. This would be for anti-inflammatory purposes. I would have vitamin D for immune modulation. I would have ashwagandha because it's an adaptogen and it helps with my stress and cortisol control. I would have saw palmetto because this controls your DHT basically, and it's a DHT blocker, which is insanely good for hair and hair loss. And finally, I would have a multivitamin. This basically covers the nutrient gaps that I may have. Moving on to number 4 is training strategy. So let me just give you a clear idea of what it looks like. When you train, you want to actually train smart. So this would be low inflammation and high adaptation. And you need to have that on the forefront of your mind at all time. This is an example of my weekly training split for the Ironman 70.3. I would have to do 2 to 3 swims a week, 2 to 3 bikes a week, 2 to 3 runs per week, and 2 to 4 days where I do resistance training at work. And the resistance training would basically encompass functional strength and mobility exercises. There is that one mandatory day off, the full day off, which should be guilt-free. Some key points to note is that intensity matters more than volume. You don't want to be chasing miles, you want to be chasing recovery and consistency. Zone 2 is basically the foundation. So when you do these endurance activities, you want to be in zone 2. If you don't know what your zone 2 is, you can get a Garmin strap and a Garmin watch and find that one out. Zone 2 is basically the foundation. So what it gives you is low stress on the body, maximal gains for endurance, and also gains in your fat metabolism. So your fat metabolism will be more effective. So the basic fundamentals of this is to train with metrics, so you can actually see something that you're looking at which is physical, and you can understand it and know how it works. Heart rate zones is one of them, for instance. There would be heart rate variability, there would be sleep score, and there would be stress score. So all of these for me I find on my Garmin watch. So if I have this watch, I can literally find out all of the metrics for the day. I can total them up, I can look at them on my phone too, so that really is beneficial during my training. So just to finalize that whole thing, I want you to take in account one rule. This is the 80-20 rule. So this 80-20 rule can be used in both nutrition and training. In terms of training, this would be 80% of it has to be low intensity and 20% of it has to be performance work. Likewise with nutrition, it's going to be 80% nutritional high quality food, and for the rest of the 20% it can be ice cream if you want it to be, because you do have to enjoy these things at the same time. The most critical thing is when you're training, you want to be in zone 2. This is the longevity zone, and this is where you have maximal gains. Well, that brings me to the end of the video. So if you found this video useful, be sure to like and subscribe. There'll be more coming soon. If you have alopecia or you know anybody with autoimmune diseases, I have written a book and it's in my bio. It's called From Gut to Glory, a holistic approach to healing alopecia. In there, you'll find my blueprint as to how I got my hair back and what I did. So if you're interested in that and you suffer with alopecia, be sure to give that a look. Anyway, thank you for coming to my talk, and I'll see you on the next one.